I didn't even get to pour my coffee before Camille told the entire table I was bankrupt. There were 12 of us that morning. Family brunch at our parents' place, complete with fresh berries, smoked salmon, and an absurd number of cloth napkins. I hadn't even sat down when Camille, in that sing-song voice she saves for attention, chimed, "Well, at least none of us had to file for bankruptcy this year. Oh, except you, sweetie." My stomach dropped so hard I almost missed the way forks froze mid-air. "Camille," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice level, "that wasn't yours to share." She didn't even blink, just took a dainty sip from her mimosa and smiled like she was doing me a favor. "I'm just saying it's nothing to be ashamed of. Happens to people who, take big risks. We still love you, right, Mom?" Mom's eyes darted between us like a spectator at a tennis match. Then she let out a diplomatic little laugh. "Of course, darling, everyone goes through phases. Phases." That was rich. To them, it was just a messy footnote in my life. To me, it was the full headline. The truth was, I had filed for bankruptcy 3 months earlier. Not because I'd been careless, but because a supplier I trusted bailed on a major project last minute, leaving me holding the bag with penalties I couldn't claw my way out of. I'd sold my car, broken the lease on my apartment, and was living in a glorified shoebox above a laundromat. But I hadn't told Camille, because I knew this is exactly what she'd do. She had a way of sugarcoating humiliation until it tasted like concern. And the worst part? Everyone at that table, my cousins, my aunts, even my own father, looked at me like I was a math problem they didn't want to solve. Awkward sympathy mixed with relief that it wasn't them. I looked at my plate and nodded. "Yeah, it happened, and I'm figuring it out." That was all I said. I didn't beg for understanding. I didn't explain the nuances of failed contracts or mention the nights I'd cried into spreadsheets trying to salvage what I could. I just took a bite of burnt toast and decided, right there, that this would be the last brunch where I let someone else narrate my life. Afterward, when people were gathering coats and squeezing goodbye hugs, Camille linked arms with me. "No hard feelings, right? It's just, you used to be the golden one. Thought it might humble you a little." I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled. "Thanks for the reminder." She laughed, like we were sharing a joke. I don't think she noticed my hand trembling as I let go of hers. But that night, I didn't cry. I opened my laptop, cleared the dozens of tabs from job search engines and online budgeting tools, and created a new spreadsheet. One tab for income streams, freelance gigs I could revive, another for debt paydown, another for something I hadn't dared consider until then, long-term goals. In that moment, something shifted. I wasn't going to explain myself anymore. I wasn't going to try and reclaim my old life. I was going to build a new one, quietly. And if Camille wanted to play the narrator of my downfall, I'd let her, because one day, I was going to own the ending. And no one would see it coming. The walls were paper thin and the ceiling fan rattled like a loose tooth, but I signed the lease anyway. Unit 3B, above a discount dry clean. No elevator, no AC. Rent was cheap enough to scrape by, and I told myself the lace curtains were charming in a vintage way, like they had a story. Truth was, they smelled like mothballs and mildew, and one of them fell on my head when I tried to open the window. But that place was freedom. After the brunch disaster, I stopped answering Camille's texts. I muted our family group chat. I think my dad tried to call once, left a voicemail that started with "Your mother thinks," and I deleted it without listening further. I needed space, and 3B gave me just enough of it to breathe. There was no room for self-pity in that apartment. The kitchenette was barely big enough for one person to stand in. My mattress was on the floor. I used a crate for a nightstand. Every morning I woke to the sound of dryers spinning beneath me, and the occasional thump of someone's lost sock hitting the ceiling. But something strange happened in that little box of a room. I started working again. Not full-time, not some glamorous comeback, just slowly. I picked up old freelance clients, the ones who hadn't ghosted me when the business tanked. I dusted off my skills, web design, branding, UX wireframes. I'd always been good with patterns, how things fit together, how people moved through systems. Even in the mess, my brain still saw order. At night, I'd sit on the floor, laptop on my knees, and work until my eyes burned. I taught myself new tools, read case studies, watched videos on scaling digital products with next to nothing. There was no applause, no one cheering me on, just a sticky notepad above my desk that read, "Do it quietly, let them wonder." Paul, the guy I'd been dating before everything fell apart, texted once. Just a casual, "Hope you're good," no follow-up. He'd broken things off 2 days after my bankruptcy went public, said he needed stability. Fair. But I wasn't going to forget that either. I also didn't forget that Camille once borrowed $5,000 from me to cover a bridal shower she was hosting. She paid me back in pieces, and told our mom it came from her bonus. I kept a mental list of all the moments I'd swallowed pride for the sake of keeping peace. That list became a quiet kind of fuel. There was one bright spot, though. Every Sunday I'd get a handwritten note in the mail, from Nana June. The envelope always smelled faintly of lavender, like her old dresser drawers. Inside, there'd be something small, a $2 bill, a clipped article about resilience, a folded napkin with a smiley face drawn in her shaky hand, and always a sentence like, "You're more than your balance sheet, honey, you're my favorite story." I taped those notes to my fridge. They became my mirror, my motivation, my silent proof that someone out there still believed in me, not for what I had, but for what I hadn't given up on. The days blurred. Work picked up. I said yes to things I used to think were beneath me, and no to people who used to control me. The word bankrupt still echoed sometimes when I walked past mirrored windows or caught a glimpse of my thinning reflection. But then I'd see the sticky note. "Do it quietly. Let them wonder." And that was enough. Until the morning I opened my inbox and saw an unexpected listing. Camille had posted a screenshot of it the night before. A lakefront property. Her dream home. I stared at the image, a wraparound porch, French doors, wisteria vines. I knew the address. I'd driven past it 100 times with her. I remembered her saying, "If I ever live there, it'll mean I made it." And just like that, the seed was planted. I didn't want revenge. I wanted something better. Camille had a Pinterest board titled Lakeview Vibes. I remember because she made me follow it. Every pin was a curated fantasy. White porch swings, lemon trees in terracotta pots, couples clinking wine glasses over sunset views. She talked about that house like it was her birthright. "When I get Lakeview," she used to say, never if. "When I'll finally host real dinner parties. Not like mom's clunky casseroles. Think rustic elegant, signature cocktails." It was always tied to performance, status. I'd drive past the house sometimes, not because I wanted it, but because I didn't know where else to go when I needed to think. Something about the porch calmed me, like it didn't care who you were as long as you stepped softly. I never imagined myself living there, until the day I saw the "for sale" sign. I had to pull over. It wasn't Camille's screenshot this time, it was real. The image she had obsessively reshared was now an open door. At first I laughed, then I stared. Something in me stirred. Not greed, not pettiness, opportunity. I checked the listing out of pure curiosity. It was slightly below market value due to a pending estate dispute, but still wildly out of reach for most. For Camille, barely within grasp. For me, with the work I'd picked up over the last 6 months, the savings I'd socked away under 3 different bank accounts, and the miracle of a freelance client in Singapore who'd just tripled my retainer, it was possible. Barely. I spent the rest of that day doing math like a maniac. Cancelled 2 meetings. Called my accountant. Okay, more like emailed him frantically with the subject line, "Can I do this or am I nuts?" His reply was short, "You're not nuts, but this is bold. I like it." That night, Camille posted a selfie on the front steps of the Lakeview property, cappuccino in hand, smiling like a realtor in a rom-com. Caption, "Manifesting, Lakeview goals coming soon." It got 217 likes in 2 hours. I stared at it and felt something heavy in my chest. Not jealousy exactly, but grief. Grief for the way she moved through the world, unafraid of entitlement, how she assumed life would bend toward her timeline. I didn't post anything. I just stared at the photo and started my offer paperwork. It felt surreal, sending in the bid. I told myself it wouldn't be accepted, that there was no way the sellers would go for my unconventional financing package, that Camille, with her flashy fiancé and polished smile, would snag it. But a week later, I got the call. They'd accepted. There was a moment of silence on the line after the realtor told me. I think he expected me to scream or cry or celebrate. But I just sat there, gripping the edge of the counter in my little apartment, staring at the flickering fluorescent light above the sink. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I breathed. "Just processing." I closed my laptop. I didn't tell anyone. Not Nana, not my one remaining friend from college, not even the client who helped make it possible. I didn't post about it. I didn't hint. Because this wasn't about performance. This was about restoration. Not revenge, but something quieter, deeper, a reclamation. I walked by the house a few days later. Camille's car was parked outside again. She was standing with a real estate agent pointing at the garden. I paused at the corner and watched her outline her future with sweeping hand gestures, a laugh, a toss of her golden hair. She had no idea. Not yet. And the strange thing? I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still, like I was finally holding something the world had tried to take from me again and again, my sense of control. So I turned around, and I went home. Because I wasn't finished yet. The house might have been mine now, but what I did next, that would matter even more. I signed the final papers at 8:42 on a Thursday morning. The title office smelled like burnt coffee and white out, and the receptionist offered me a lollipop on my way out. It was anticlimactic. No red ribbon, no cameras, no slow-motion moment of arrival. Just a house deed. And silence. Camille still didn't know. I'd waited 3 days after closing before even driving onto the property. When I finally walked through the front door, it felt like I was trespassing on someone else's life. The hardwood floors creaked like they were greeting me cautiously. The lake shimmered through the French doors, indifferent. This place didn't know me yet. But it would. I spent the weekend walking every inch of it barefoot. The guest room had dusty floral wallpaper. The master bath had a broken light fixture. The kitchen was workable. But I wasn't in a rush to fix it all. I wanted to breathe it in first. Let it unfold. Meanwhile, Camille was posting Instagram stories like she was still in the running. One clip showed her sipping white wine in front of a different house entirely, but she tagged it Lakeview Dreams. Another showed her flipping through catalogs. "Just waiting on one little approval," she chirped. It almost felt cruel. Almost. But I wasn't here to play a game, I was here to end one. On Monday, I invited her over. I sent the text like it was nothing. "Hey, can you swing by 3 p.m? I have something to show you." She replied in 5 minutes. "If it's another crypto project, I swear I'm staging an intervention." I didn't answer. At 2:57, her car pulled into the drive. She stepped out in platform heels and a white blazer, perfectly curled hair bouncing as she marched up the path. For a second, I saw her younger self, the girl who used to braid my hair before school, the one who gave me her last stick of gum before piano recitals. Then it vanished. She didn't knock, just pushed the door open and said, "You better not be pitching a podcast." Then she froze. Her eyes took in the foyer, the antique mirror I'd already polished, the scent of fresh wood oil in the air. "Wait, what is this?" she said, blinking. "Is this a listing tour?" "No." I stepped into view, wiping my hands on a towel. "This is my house." Silence. Her head tilted, a confused smile twitching. "Your house? You mean, I closed last week?" Her eyes darted around. No, you're joking." "I'm not." "But She took a step forward, her voice rising. "I was in negotiations. They told me they had an offer but didn't give me a chance to counter." I shrugged. "Guess they liked mine better?" She stood there, speechless, gripping the edge of the kitchen island like it might explain something. "Why?" she whispered. "You knew this was my dream house." "I know," I said. "You talked about it every holiday for the last 5 years." "So why take it?" I met her gaze. "Because I could, and because I needed to prove, to myself, not to you, that I could rebuild something, on my own terms." Her mouth opened, then closed again. She looked smaller somehow, like the frame of all her certainty had. She didn't yell, she didn't cry, she just said, "You blindsided me." "No," I replied gently, "you blinded yourself." She stood there for a long time, staring at the room like it betrayed her. Then, without another word, she walked out. The screen door creaked behind her. I leaned against the counter, heart pounding, not from pride, not from guilt, but from clarity. I hadn't stolen Camille's dream, I'd simply stopped letting her shape mine. And in doing so, I'd built something I never expected, a place of my own, a quiet kind of power, a beginning. I didn't send out formal invites. Just a simple message to a few old friends, a couple of ex-colleagues who hadn't ghosted me, and, yes, Camille. It read, Little housewarming this Sunday, nothing fancy. Come if you want champagne and lake views. I didn't expect her to show, but part of me hoped she would. The morning of the gathering, I woke early. The house felt different, like it had settled around me, like it had accepted me. I wiped down every surface, lit candles that smelled like cedar and fig, and chilled 3 bottles of Prosecco. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, just because I wanted the space to reflect where I was now. Not perfect, not rich, but whole. The first guests arrived just after noon, people I hadn't seen in months. A few of them blinked twice when I opened the door. "Wait, you live here?" one of them asked, peeking inside like I might be subletting from some tech executive. "Yup," I said, smiling. "All mine." There were polite gasps, some genuine, some performative. That was fine. We laughed, we clinked glasses, someone played soft jazz from their phone, people wandered out onto the porch and murmured about the view like it was a painting. And then at 1:42 p.m., Camille arrived. She walked in like she still belonged there. Hair curled, lips glossed, gift bag in hand. I caught my breath for a second. She wore her old public picturesque smile, the one she used when she wanted to look unbothered. The room shifted when she stepped in. Conversations dipped. Even the music felt like it quieted. "Hey," she said, "didn't think you'd actually go through with it." "I did," I replied. "Welcome." She handed me the bag. Inside was a soy candle labeled Humble Abode. I bit back a smirk. She walked slowly through the living room, running her fingers along the banister. I could tell she was doing mental inventory, imagining what she'd have changed, what she still would change if she'd bought it. I stayed near the kitchen letting her roam. Guests gave her side eyes. Most knew the family history, some didn't. It wasn't until she reached the back window that she spoke again. "I had a Pinterest board for this place, you know?" "I remember. I had a name picked out for the dog I was going to adopt when I moved in." I nodded. "You still could. Somewhere else." Her jaw tightened. She wasn't used to being told to redirect her dreams. Camille had always expected life to orbit her desires. I used to be one of those moons. Not anymore. "I never thought you'd actually beat me to it," she said finally. I raised my glass. "Maybe you shouldn't have underestimated me." Her eyes narrowed. But then, something flickered. A crack in the mask. It wasn't rage, it was something like recognition. A few guests started whispering. Someone snapped a photo near the fireplace. Camille turned back to me and lowered her voice. "You waited to invite me until you could humiliate me in front of your little gallery of redemption." I blinked. "This wasn't about you," she tilted her head. "It always is." "No," I said, firmer now. "That's the difference between us. You want applause, I just wanted peace." She stood there for a moment, silent. Then she smiled, cold, glossy, fragile. "Well," she said, raising her flute of champagne, "congratulations, I hope it fills whatever hole you were trying to patch." I held her gaze. It didn't, but building it did. And with that, she turned and walked out, heels echoing against the hardwood like punctuation marks. The room seemed lighter when the door closed. Later, when everyone had gone and the sun dipped below the trees, I sat on the porch alone. The lake shimmered in the fading light. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, a quiet pride. Not the kind you announce, but the kind that lets you breathe deeper. And in the silence I whispered to no one in particular. Let them wonder. 3 days after the housewarming, I got a call from Mom. She never called. Not unless someone was in the hospital or a casserole dish needed returning. So when I saw her name flashing on my phone, I braced myself. "Hi, sweetie," she began, voice too smooth. "I just had coffee with Camille." Of course she did. "She's upset," Mom continued. "She said you blindsided her, that you bought the house out of spite." I looked out the window, watching a pair of ducks glide across the lake. My voice stayed flat. "I didn't buy it out of spite." "Well," she said, pausing just long enough to imply disagreement, "it does feel like you were making a statement." I replied. "But not to her." Mom exhaled. "You know, your father and I were really hoping you girls would grow out of this competition." That made me laugh. Not out of humor, out of disbelief. "Competition? I filed for bankruptcy, Mom. I lived above a dry cleaner." "You never told us. You never asked." Silence, and then softer. "Camille said you cut everyone out." I rubbed my temple. "She told the entire family about my bankruptcy at brunch. She said it like she was reading a headline. Do you know what that felt like?" Another pause. I thought she was trying to normalize it, Mom offered weakly. No, I said. She was trying to own my story, the same way she always does. There it was. The truth I'd swallowed for years. Camille had always been the narrator in our family. I was the sensitive one, the creative one, the quiet achiever, and she got to decide when those labels were charming and when they were pathetic. Mom cleared her throat. She said you gave her hope, that if you could get that house after everything, maybe she could too. I didn't answer, because I knew that wasn't hope, that was envy dressed in optimism. She's been having a hard year, you know, Mom added, like it was an excuse. Her engagement fell apart. Her work is unstable. So was my entire life, and no one offered me an umbrella, I said. I'm offering one now. That stopped me, not because it was comforting, but because it was the first time she'd acknowledged I'd been in the storm at all. I'm not angry, I said quietly. I just needed space to heal, without being reduced to a punchline. And the house? It helped. I looked around. At the clean lines of the window frames, the warm creak of the floor beneath my feet, the quiet that wasn't loneliness anymore. Yes, I said. It reminded me that I can build something real, that I'm not what I lost. Mom sighed again. I guess we didn't really see how deep it went. No, I said, you didn't. We hung up soon after on a note neither warm nor bitter. Just honest. That night I sat in the living room and reread an old note from Nana June. Truth costs more than money, but it's worth every penny. I finally understood what she meant. Telling the truth, not just to others but to myself, was the most expensive thing I'd done. It cost me comfort, illusions, even relationships, but it gave me back my voice, and no one could auction that off again, not even Camille. I planted lavender under the kitchen window. Not because I knew what I was doing, I had zero gardening experience, but because Nana June once told me it kept mosquitoes and regrets away. It grew wild at first, unruly and lopsided, but it still bloomed, kind of like me. The Lakeview house slowly stopped feeling like a symbol and started feeling like shelter. Not just from the rain but from the noise, the voices that used to narrate my worth like they had the only microphone. I still worked late. I still budgeted every dollar. The life I had wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, entirely. Camille didn't reach out again, not after the housewarming, not after Mom's call. She went quiet on social media too. I think that was her version of retreat. Pulling back to rebuild a new story, one where she wasn't the villain. I don't hate her. In some strange way I get her. We were raised in a house where status meant safety, and emotions were things to be managed, not expressed. She just absorbed the rules better than I did. The difference was, I unlearned them. One evening in early fall, I hosted a small dinner. Just 6 people. Friends who'd stood by me, clients who'd become real companions, and one new neighbor who showed up with homemade bread and no agenda. I lit candles, opened the French doors, and played a Nina Simone record on low. At one point, someone asked, "How'd you end up here anyway?" I smiled. "It's a long story," I said, "but it started with someone trying to write my ending, and me deciding to pick up the pen." They laughed, toasted, moved on, but I sat with that thought long after the plates were cleared. Because it was true, this wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. And the best part? I didn't need Camille, or anyone else, to clap for it. That night before bed I read the last letter Nana June had sent before she passed. "Sweet girl, don't ever let someone's small version of you become the home you live in. Build your own, make it bigger." I folded the paper carefully, slid it into my nightstand and whispered, "I did, Nana. I really did." So if you're still reading this, if you've ever felt small in a room that should have celebrated you, if someone's ever mocked your fall without seeing your climb, know this. You are not the sum of what you've lost. You are the architect of what comes next. And if you've been building quietly like I did, I hope one day you invite them in and let the silence speak for you. If this story hit home, even just a little, I'd love to hear yours. Drop a comment below, or share this with someone who's still mid-climb. Let them know, the house, the dream, the peace, it's all still possible.